y'all, Dixie here. Today I want to compare my $600 backpacking tent to a $60 backpacking tent. I've seen a lot of pretty cheap backpacking tents on Amazon, and I always wondered, are they actually any good, or is it just some piece of junk that really isn't even worth the cheap price that they're sold for? So I decided if I could find one that was less than 3 pounds that also had good reviews, then I'd go ahead and give it a shot. The River Country Products 2-person trekking pole backpacking tent met that criteria, and it was actually rated 4.4 stars out of 5 on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon for less than $60, or $52.95 is what it's going for right now. But on the River Country Products website, it's on sale right now for $49.95. One of the reasons I chose this one is, like I said before, it was under 3 pounds, it was pretty cheap, and it also set up similarly to my Zpacks Duplex in the way that it used trekking poles instead of designated tent poles. If you're not familiar with my Zpacks Duplex, which is also a 2-person tent that I used on my PCT and CDT thru hikes, it is a tent that is made out of Cuben fiber or Dyneema. It is very lightweight, coming in at just 21 ounces for the tent alone. And without the stuff sack, it's actually 20.7 ounces. It's pretty well ventilated for a single wall tent. It's got netting around the bathtub floor. And if you're on the inside of the tent, you'll notice that if condensation did collect, which in single wall tents, it is common for condensation to collect, it can just run down the walls and through that netting around the bathtub floor. That way it doesn't collect on the floor of the tent. The bathtub floor is 8 inches tall, so you really don't have to be concerned with splash up from the rain, even though there is that netting around the bathtub floor. Then there is a door on either side, and both of those doors also have netting underneath the 2 vestibules. I like the fact that it does have a door on either side. It's pretty convenient if you're going to backpack with somebody. That way, if you have to get up and go pee in the middle of the night, you're not having to bump into somebody trying to crawl out a door in front of you and, just one door. You can kind of unzip the door on your side and just tuck and roll out your side. I was kind of intimidated by the looks of the Duplex, and when I first got it, I was nervous that it was going to be really difficult to set up. The first time was kind of a mess, but after that, I got the hang of it on the second time, and in no time, I was a pro. The dimensions of the Duplex, which is rather roomy, is 3.75 feet wide, 7.5 feet long, and 4 feet high. And if you do have a light rain and you want a little more ventilation, because again, it is a single wall tent, you can roll back one door of the vestibule and leave it open for a little aeration. And then on the inside of the tent, there are 2 little pockets that are conveniently located to where you can access the stuff inside the pockets if you're inside the tent, or outside of the tent, you just want to reach in the door real quick. But in those little pockets, you can put things like cell phones, wallets. I like to put the tent stuff sack and my steak bag. That way it's easy to find in the morning and it's not all, jumbled up with my gear and somehow got accidentally stuffed inside my pack. And the Zpacks Duplex can be yours for $599, and this does not include trekking poles or stakes. Those things are sold separately, but while this is an expensive piece of gear, it is very lightweight, it is durable, and it is a very well-made product. Now let's talk about the River Country Products tent, the Trekker 2. I was pretty excited when I got this tent in. I wanted to open it up and see what it looked like and, kind of judge it from the start. The first thing I noticed is that it was rather compact, and the way it was folded up all nicely and everything, I wondered if I'd be able to shove it back in the stuff sack and it actually fit. The next thing I noticed is that it seemed to be made out of a pretty sturdy material. It seemed well made, and the body of the tent is made out of a polyurethane coated polyester, which is waterproof, and then the bathtub floor, it felt like a tarp. It is also waterproof and is made from Oxford taffeta. It sounds so sophisticated. So with this tent also, like the Duplex, you do not need a ground cloth. It is waterproof, it is durable, and you can always have one just for the sake of safety, but you don't have to worry about adding extra weight to the weight of the tent, because you don't need it. My least favorite thing that I noticed after unpacking the tent is that it only has one door. Also, there is no vestibule. That might not seem like that big of a deal, but if you are going to have 2 people in a 2-person tent, then it is nice to have the vestibule for some extra storage for gear, your pack, stuff like that. Also, when you experience some rainy weather, it's nice to be able to cook in your vestibule if you want to and be shielded from the rain. But all in all, the tent was pretty easy to set up with the instructions that came with it. And one of the things that I noticed that was a little bit different than the Duplex is where it sets up with the trekking poles on the front and the back. you set the trekking poles up upside down. So the point goes into like a little ring on the front and the back, and it rests on the handles. Fairly quickly, I noticed that this tent was not going to be as ventilated as the Duplex because the wall of the tent connected directly to the bathtub of the tent, and I knew that with some condensation, especially because it was less ventilated, it would probably roll down and end up in the bathtub on the floor. But it is pretty well ventilated at the front of the tent. There's a screen mesh door and then the waterproof door on the outside, so it does have a double door. So if it wasn't raining, you could open the waterproof part and not have to worry about bugs getting in and stuff like that. So in warmer weather, that would be convenient because you could roll the waterproof doors back and not have to worry about mosquitoes coming in on you. But if it is raining, then that will have to be closed. But I noticed that at the bottom of that waterproof door, it didn't connect and zip to the tent. So it was still kind of flopping open and waving in the wind. Also on the back side of the tent, there are two little window vents, if you will, that kind of pull open and attach to the back stake to allow a little more ventilation in the back. Like the Zpacks Duplex, the River Country tent is pretty roomy on the inside. It's 7 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 3.5 feet high. So it's not quite as long, or it doesn't have as much headspace as the Duplex, but it is a little bit wider than the Duplex. And I felt like in a way that kind of made up for not having a vestibule. I mean, not exactly, but the fact that there's a little more width to work with. So if you do have two people sleeping side by side, there is a little extra room to put packs or other gear next to one of the people. In addition to getting this tent for around $50, you also get 8 aluminum stakes. And I thought that this was pretty nice because the stakes are only about 3 to 3.5 ounces or so. So they are lightweight aluminum stakes, and it's not something that, you know, you're going to get some big old honking heavy stakes and then you have to pay more money to replace them. So you end up putting more than around $50 into the tent. Now the stakes are something that you could upgrade later to save a little bit of weight, but they are pretty good stakes for starting out. The total weight of just the tent is 2 pounds 9 ounces, but with the stuff sack and the stakes that come with it, it's around 2 pounds 12 ounces. The only negative thing that I could say upon my initial inspection of this tent is that there was a small flaw with the stitching on the inside of the tent. I think that it's not really going to affect the functionality or anything like that. It's just cosmetic, but other than that, it seemed to be a very well-made tent, good quality, not something that was just made out of crappy products and kind of thrown together. And to my surprise, as I broke down the tent, it actually does stuff well back into the stuff sack, which in my mind is important because if it's a tent that you have to fold up repeatedly the same way, it can crease the tent and start to break it down in those creases. So they suggest that with backpacking tents, something that you're going to use over and over like that is good to just stuff it into the stuff sack. That way it's creasing all the time in different areas. I initially set up the tent on a nice, sunny, clear day, and it seemed all fine and dandy, like it would function well, but I thought, you know, how would this thing perform in the rain? So I decided, well, I'm gonna camp out in it one night in the rain and see how it does. So I went out in the afternoon and I set it up. And some of the things that I was concerned about when thinking about it getting rained on is that it's really not a pretty tent, which I don't care as long as things function well. So it's kind of saggy looking, you know, kind of reminds me of a dirty diaper a little bit. And I thought with it sagging down like that, I wonder if rain would collect in the top or if it would roll off well. Also, I was concerned about the lack of ventilation. I figured, yeah, there's going to be some condensation. Again, that's normal for single wall tents, but how much condensation am I going to deal with? Am I going to wake up completely flooded out? And finally, at the door I mentioned earlier, the waterproof door is not anchored to the tent. So I just wondered, is the wind and rain going to get in because that thing's kind of flopping around on the screen door? For several hours, it misted on the tent and everything got good and wet. The ground got real soggy, and I went in at night and went to sleep. It was a pretty windy night, and so I thought that might help test the issue I was concerned about with the door. And it was real misty, real wet, it rained, and so it was a good test with the condensation. So anyway, I woke up this morning and there was condensation like I expected, and had there been that mesh around the door, like the Zpacks Duplex, then the rain would have just run off the wall, right through the screen mesh and onto the ground. But instead, it was kind of dripping down a little bit and onto the floor. Now, I didn't experience anything like it raining from the heavens from the roof of the tent. So it wasn't like I was completely soaked. My sleeping bag, which was on my sleeping pad, was dry. I think as long as you don't lay up against the wall of the tent where all that condensation is running down onto your sleeping bag, you'll probably be good. On the outside of the tent, where I was concerned that water might collect and just kind of weigh down the tent, it didn't do that at all. It actually ran off very well. It didn't get droopy. It held up well in the wind. So while the condensation was more apparent with the River Country Products tent than what I've experienced with my Duplex, I have heard of people with the Duplex or the Solplex pulling up a bit because, again, it's common with single wall tents. With the instructions that come with the River Country tent, there is an area there that says, yes, there can be some condensation during rain or in, more damp climates. So one of the things that they suggest that might help is getting some waterproof spray from Walmart or, any gear shop and spraying the outside of the tent and the inside of the tent, because they say it just kind of changes up how the water collects on the wall of the tent. But they do assure you that the tent is waterproof, so you're not necessarily spraying the outside because, water is going to get in and it's not waterproof. I guess it's more or less like a preventative thing, but apparently that can help some with condensation. Also, there is another version of this tent. It's the Trekker 2.2. And they implemented some more vents on the side walls of the tent that kind of stake out. So that would certainly help, having that mesh there for condensation to run down, but also to add more airflow into the tent to help prevent condensation in the first place. The tent is 4 ounces heavier because they implemented those mesh vents. So, you can decide if it's worth it to you to add a little bit more weight, but that's going to put your tent weight alone at 2 pounds, 13 ounces. It was windy and rainy while I was sleeping in the tent, but I didn't get the monsoon that I really wanted to be able to test that double door. Because I didn't get those monsoon conditions, I decided to simulate them myself with a hose pipe. And I sprayed the door really well, soaked it real good with some high pressure water, and on the inside, no water got in there. So I really don't think, even in high winds and pretty heavy rain, that door flap, the way it kind of hangs open, is going to cause any issues or pooling of water in the tent. I also hit the top with some pretty good water to see how well it rolls off because, while I was in the tent sleeping in the rain, I couldn't really see that. And it does bead very well and did not collect on top where I was concerned about it sagging. Overall, I think the River Country Products tent is a pretty good startup tent for somebody. And if you want to save $550 and you don't mind not having the convenience of 2 doors and 2 vestibules, you don't mind carrying 20 ounces extra of weight, and if you're willing to work with the condensation/ventilation issues, which I really don't think are that bad for it being a single wall tent, then this is probably a good tent for you. Now, I can't vouch for how well this would hold up on a 5 to 6 month through hike, but even if you had to replace it every month for a 5 to 6 month trek, you're still saving money versus buying the $600 tent. But if any of y'all have used this tent or you have experience with one similar to it, so like sub 3 pounds and in the same price range, please feel free to share that in the comments. I know not everyone wants to go drop $600 on an ultralight tent, especially if they're just getting into the world of backpacking. And while we're on the topic of tents, I just want to let y'all know that I will be doing a tent giveaway very soon. So on this channel, as a way of saying thank you to the subscribers and the folks in this community, we do giveaways every 20,000 subscribers. So this time it's going to be a tent, and I'll probably give away this tent that I used in the video, the River Country Products tent, and also the choice of the 2 tents that I've used on my through hikes. And one of those is a Zpacks Duplex. So I won't be giving away the crusty one that made it through 3,000 miles of the CDT, but a brand new one. So if you don't want to miss out on that and you want to be a part of it, make sure you're subscribed. That is the only requirement. Make sure you hit the little bell. Thank y'all so much for watching today, and we will see y'all next time.